You are listening to Ministry Minded, a podcast of Step Up to Life, where we discuss the gospel, theology, and how to navigate the highs and lows of Christian ministry. Living out the Christian faith is a complex thing to navigate, so we're here to help you think through it as you progress on your journey. Bill Bose, welcome to Ministry Minded. We're glad to have you.
Well, thank you. It really is an honor to be here.
You, a longtime supporter, connection with Step Up to Life. You've known this guy. You've been putting up with this guy for a long time.
Probably
Sorry about that.
48 years.
Well,
wow.
Going to Asbury, I was 18 or 19. You were a year younger?
A year or two. What year did you graduate from high school?
1865.
75.
Okay,
75.
I'm
Back when
76.
Nebraska first
76.
became a state, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. We didn't even have a football team. Anyway, so Bill's been a friend for many, many years. Some of my very first memories of you are, of course, playing church softball. Mm-hmm. And Bill is an amazing outfielder. One quick story. So, the guys would, I'm trying to think how to put this. So Bill's in the outfield, and we had 10. They allow you a short fielder, so you'd have 10 players. And we would usually put a female there. So the ball would be hit, and the female, she could catch the ball usually, but Bill was there just in case. And I don't know how many times I remember the ball bouncing off of her mitt, and Bill's there to catch it, backing up the short fielder.
You're the backup.
And still playing softball. You need to know this. I didn't think about it till right now. But this man right here is a world champion athlete.
That was a few years ago.
Well, hey, we're still talking about the globe, the earth, in all the earth. So, men's softball world champion.
So I play in a over 50 league here in town. And then out of that over 50 league, there are every 5-year age group teams that do traveling tournaments.
Right.
And when I was on the 55 to 60 team, I think it was, we won the world championships.
That is so cool.
Wow.
Which was a lot of fun. And now I'm in the 65 to 69 range.
Was that held here in Omaha, or where was that?
That one was in Phoenix.
Okay. Nice.
The three big tournaments of the year in Lakeland, Florida, Las Vegas, and Phoenix. And Phoenix has they call it the World Championships.
Okay.
Wow.
Nice. That's great.
It's a lot of fun.
We could delve into that a lot further, but probably not the reason we're here today, right?
Yeah, right.
And not very interesting.
Well,
either.
but it's been,
Hey.
it's been a big part of your life. So that's
has.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, and you're still staying so active, and that's cool.
Right.
So anyway, back the days of Asbury College, Bill and I, this crazy story of driving down in the middle of the night from here to Kentucky and falling asleep and getting pulled over by a cop, and my motorcycle's on the back of his, what kind of car was that?
Monte Carlo.
Monte Carlo, yes, a tan brownish color.
Yep.
So all that just to say, a lot of memories. Also at Asbury, you played varsity soccer, intercollegiate soccer. And you were a starter and a defensive man, as I believe,
Yes.
as I recall.
I went from playing offensive line in soccer in high school to defense in college.
Yeah.
And it turned out defense was much more natural for me.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Had a great time there.
Bill's the real athlete in the room. I know that much, that's for sure. So I ain't no world champion, but
Yeah, right.
maybe someday.
Yeah.
I got 6th in the world once, and so people say, well, what does the future hold? I say, well, I want to be the world champion. And here's my strategy. Outlive 5 guys. That's all I got to do.
Yeah.
I might be 90 to 94 age group, but if I can just outlive them, maybe I can achieve what you have.
I remember your dad winning the Cornhusker State games in tennis.
Yes, several times, in fact, because there was nobody in his age group.
That's one strategy. Just outlast them. Just outlast them.
Oh my goodness.
So-
Anyway, enough foolishness. But so Bill and I go way back. Your family, well, I was going to say your family was an integral part of Trinity Church back in the day, but let's go back before that. Tell us kind of about your early upbringing, your kind of faith journey, religious experiences.
Very good,
Yeah.
Raised a good Catholic boy.
Okay.
Both my parents were raised Catholics. In fact, one of my mom's sisters, so my aunt was a nun.
Okay.
So very much in the Catholic faith.
Right.
Grew up going to church, going to Catholic school, grade school and high school. So not only church on Sundays, but then we went once or twice during the week.
Sure.
When I was at St. Bernard School up in kind of northwest Omaha now.
Okay.
Great experience, loved it. Lived in neighborhoods with lots and lots of kids, lots of good Catholic families.
Okay.
But God was never a thought you do your time by going to church, and the hope was that would be good enough to get you into heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you learned, then you realize, I can't only go to church, I have to do good works. I have to work my way into heaven.
Okay.
So that was the extent of our collective knowledge. And then my mom's mom, so my grandma Morgan, I like to say she got caught up in the Catholic charismatic movement in probably the late 60s, early 70s.
Okay.
And she became a born again Christian. She was on fire. Eventually, she dragged my grandpa along with it. I don't know why men we tend to be slow when it comes to that.
Yeah.
So she shared it with her 7 children, and out of the 7 children, I would say probably 4 to 5 probably became Christians.
Okay.
Made commitments to Jesus.
Okay.
My mom being one of those, and then within a couple of years, my dad was, and we were still going to the Catholic Church, and we'd gone to St. Bernard's forever, but they were evidently trying to open a new parish a little bit northwest and meeting at Roncalli High School, where I went to school. And
I see where this is going.
the story is that the Catholics were meeting in the cafeteria, and this other group called Trinity Church, which we knew nothing about, was meeting in the auditorium. So we're going to the Catholic Mass in the cafeteria, and we must have gotten there early. And my parents heard this noise coming from the auditorium, and they figured that must be where we're supposed to go. So we walked into Trinity Church and never went to Catholic Mass again. And for me, I'm a teenager, I'm a senior in high school.
Okay.
Going to Mass was an obligation. Didn't particularly enjoy it. And if you had a priest who gave a really short homily and you could get out of there within 35 minutes, that was great.
Right.
So now we start going to Trinity, and the services were an hour and a half.
Right.
And not only on Sunday morning, but then you go back Sunday night for another hour and a half, and then Wednesday night youth group. So I'm going to Roncalli 5 days a week for school, twice on Sunday, one on Wednesday night.
Oh, my goodness.
And
you should have just set up a tent in there.
I know. I felt like I lived there.
Right.
My senior year. Yeah, it was a very memorable year. So I didn't really, I enjoyed Trinity. I really loved youth group, hanging out with kids. But I didn't pay a lot of attention to the spiritual aspect of it.
Right.
I was a good kid. I rarely caused my parents any trouble. I just didn't know how to get into trouble. It's just not in my nature. So I thought, okay, I'm good enough to get into heaven. I don't really need much other stuff. So then, 19 years old, I graduated, started going to UNO, my first year out of high school. Not a clue what I wanted to do. And I'm dating a girl from Trinity. And one night, as I was dropping her off at home, she said, "Tell me about your testimony." And I thought, I don't have a testimony. There's nothing there. I don't have a faith story. I don't have a commitment story. I don't have anything. And that bothered me. And I thought, oh man, this is really bothering me now. What do I do about this? So I called Pastor Murdoch and said, my girlfriend asked me about my testimony. I realized I don't have a testimony. I need to find out what's going on. Where am I? What am I doing? So I met with him on a Thursday, might have been a Wednesday afternoon at your old house in Pacific Heights.
Yes.
Is that it?
Yes, they lived there for I think 49 years.
Man. And in the office across the desk from him, and we had a great conversation. And really, he walked me through Step Up to Life. And I had obviously heard of it from going to church, but I'd never really looked into it. And he just broke it down step by step for me, and I decided I was at the concern stage.
Okay.
And one of the things your dad asked me, kind of in closing, was, wouldn't it be terrible if God would put you under conviction for not being more concerned and not being willing to take that step? Because I told him I'm content with where I am, but it still bothers me. So maybe I'm not that content. And I said, well, yeah, who wants to be under conviction by God? That would be a terrible thing. So what I do on my way home, I said, God, if you want me, if this is going to work out and I'm going to get rid of this heaviness, this guilt that I'm feeling, you're going to have to convict me. So over the next 3 days, I lost the girlfriend, I lost my job, and the car broke down. My 71 Monte Carlo.
No, not the Monte Carlo.
So in a 19-year-old's life, those are three pretty critical things.
For sure.
So Sunday morning, we went to church. I powered through, and I resisted doing anything at church. Went back Sunday night, and gosh, everything he said applied to me. It's like he was talking directly to me in his sermon that Sunday night. And I got to the point, that's it. I give up. Jesus, come in.
Wow.
And, you can't say it's been great ever since then, but there's been a peace ever since then.
Yeah. Wow. Now, do you remember, so what year would that have been?
So that would have been the fall of 77, October of 77.
Really? Okay. Because 2 years later, August of 79, in a Sunday night service at Roncalli, I went forward and surrendered my life to the Lord. We might have been in the same chair or something down in the front row. Isn't that something?
Was your dad surprised to see you do that?
I talked the talk. I didn't really walk the walk, and
So
they knew that I wasn't.
He might have suspected something was off.
Yeah, they rejoiced, but
You had all the outward trappings.
man, I had head faith, dead faith, devil's faith, and temporary faith, but I didn't have saving faith. That's another podcast for another time.
Yeah,
part of our
that's a
seminar.
good one.
But yeah, isn't that something?
is.
Same place 2 years later.
Wow.
Yep.
So you beat me to it by 2 years. Look at
I
you.
never knew that.
Yeah.
So you're saying the first time you went to Trinity Church, you were lost.
Yes.
I mean, you went to the wrong
literally
service.
lost. We went to the wrong church.
So you had to get lost to get saved.
Yes, exactly.
Well, certainly when the service started, your family must have been going like,
What is this?
This is not a
Yeah.
Catholic mass.
But I think the thing that won mom and dad over was the friendliness of people. You go into a Catholic mass, your friends are there because you're in that parish, but you know them and it's very familiar. But you go into a strange place and all of a sudden there are these genuinely warm people greeting you and saying, "Hey, thanks for being here. What's your name? My name is."
Yeah.
Makes all the difference in the world. And my dad being a very people person, that meant a lot to him.
Sure.
And my mom just felt at home right away. So there wasn't much doubt after that.
Well, they're great people, and they immediately connected with a bunch of other great people.
They did.
And it became quite a family over many, many years.
My dad's claim to fame when it comes to Trinity is, remember when the church sold bonds to build the new building out on Dodge? He was the first person to buy a bond.
Oh, really?
$50.
Oh, my gosh.
And that was
That's
a
great.
lot of money for us.
Yeah.
We were not rolling in the dough at all. But he was very proud of being able to contribute to the church
That's
that way.
great.
Wow.
That is great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so that's basically you're in your college years at that point.
Right.
So after that, did you know what you were going to do in terms of your career at that point, or had
not a clue.
you were still kind
I
of
was still a
drifting
lost
that way?
19-year-old.
Okay.
So I'd gone to UNO my first year. Didn't know what I wanted to do. My best friend and I decided we'd declare electrical engineering as a major because we both like math classes.
Oh.
We both took our first intro to engineering class the second semester of our freshman year, and that convinced us that engineering was not a place for us. So I had no idea what I wanted to do. I told my parents I wouldn't be going back in the fall, so I dropped out, not a clue what I wanted to do. And then your parents were going down to visit you in September, October of 76.
Okay.
The fall of 76.
Yeah.
And asked if I wanted to come along.
Sure.
And this is down
had-
to Asbury.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is a long road
Okay.
trip.
Yeah,
down to
long
Asbury.
road trip. And they didn't know me that well. I suspect that they suspected I was struggling.
Uh-huh.
But they invited me along. That weekend was life-changing because I saw the campus. I met the soccer coach. We talked about playing soccer.
Nice.
And that actually, you remember how the quarters would start between
Yes.
Christmas and New Year?
It was a 4-quarter per year system instead of a 2-semester system with like a January term.
Oh.
So it was,
So they always had one day of class between Christmas and New Year, which was really odd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started going that, we'll call it January of,
Okay.
of 78, I think
Yeah.
it was. And gosh, it was a great 3.5 years that I spent there. A lot of growing spiritually, a lot of growing in responsibility. Getting away from home was good for me and good for my parents. Playing soccer was terrific. Had such a great experience at that.
What dorm were you in?
Johnson.
What?
Johnson, Maine.
Johnson,
up on
Maine.
3rd floor.
Yes.
So 2nd floor was the zoo, although the whole dorm was the zoo, and we were on the 3rd floor.
Wait a minute. This is an inside
So this
moniker.
is-
What does the zoo mean?
Johnson, Maine, one of the 5 or 6 guys' dorms, they had gotten the nickname the zoo somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was on the 2nd floor of the zoo.
That was the
The
zooiest
wild guys
of the
lived
zoo.
there,
The zooiest was the 2nd floor, and we were out of control half the time. The RA kept coming up. Shut up, you guys.
One day, remember it had the dormitory rooms and 2 bathrooms on each floor.
Okay.
And we dammed up one of the showers one time. It had 3 shower heads in the shower room, and put plastic up on the door, and we tried to make a swimming pool out of the shower area. But it leaked through the tile.
Oh,
Of
no.
course.
And started dripping on the 2nd floor and the 1st floor.
Oh, wow.
We heard this thundering herd coming up the stairs, and we had to promise to never do it again.
Since we're telling Asbury Zoo stories.
Yeah.
So you know how they would have the runner, the carpet runner, when you'd first come onto the
yeah.
floor? It would go maybe 15 feet, and then it was just tile. So I'm just a freshman, and I'm trying to learn what these guys do. So they had taken like dishwasher soap and put it all the way down the hall. And this is a long hallway with dorm rooms on either side. Then they throw water all over it, and they would get naked, and then they would start on the landing of one end and run when they can get traction on the runner as fast as they could, and then they would plop down and just slide all the way down the hallway. One guy went out onto the fire escape on the other end, totally nude. Anyway, I never did it. I'm just saying. I'm just reporting.
You were an observant.
I was an observer, yes. There were other things I did I won't mention, but I never did that.
But it was a great time being away at college.
It was so fun.
It was. So when I went to Asbury,
What did you major in?
well, I met with the counselor
Okay.
before I registered for classes, and they said, "What do you want to major?" I don't know. I said, "I like math." They said, "Okay, we have 2 math majors you can do. You can go straight math, which kind of leads you into the business world, or you can go math and education, which become a teacher." What's the difference? Straight math is one of the main differences. You have to take 2 years of a foreign language. And in math education, you take the educational theory courses instead of a foreign language. Other than that, the math classes and theory classes were all the same. I said, give me education, because foreign languages and I do not get along at all. I could not learn a foreign language to save my life. So I said, math, secondary education. So I majored in math, secondary education,
Okay.
and picked up a PE major along the way.
Oh, right, sure.
And then I had no idea what being a teacher meant. Went to one of the high schools in Lexington to do my student teaching,
Yeah.
and had a great experience. I enjoyed it. I had been very afraid to get in front of people up until that point. Speech class was the fear. But if I'm showing kids how to do something like algebra, it was pretty easy, and it was kind of fun. So then Doug Woodard was teaching. He was a year or 2 ahead of us, or me, and he was teaching at Bellevue Christian Academy at the time. And he said, "Hey, Bill," I was home for Christmas, or no, it was in the summer when we were playing softball going into my senior year. He said, "We're going to need a math teacher next school year after I graduate." And he said, you should ask about it. So I did, and when I was home for Christmas break, interviewed with the principal and the assistant principal. They hired me on the spot, and I started teaching math.
Nice. Wow.
At the Bellevue Christian Academy, which was run by Bellevue Assembly of God at the time, now Bellevue Christian
How
Center.
many years did you teach there?
A whole 3 years.
3 years. Wow. Okay.
So in that 3 years, Debbie and I met, got married, got pregnant, and bought a house. And our plan, and plan is a term that I use very loosely, was that she would quit working whenever we had kids. So we had kids 1 year after we got married. So she quit working. She was making $13,500 a year at Mutual. I was making $10,500 a year teaching.
Yes.
We went a month and a half and realized, oh my gosh, we're not going to make it. This $10,500 is enough to raise a family and have a house.
My goodness.
So I told the school I wouldn't be back the next year. started looking for jobs. The economy went into a bit of a downturn. Nobody was hiring, and I was getting pretty nervous. And then late in the summer, my dad heard an ad on the radio that the Omaha Fire Department was taking applications for firefighters.
Okay.
Had no idea what that meant, but it was an application for a job. So I stuck the application in, went through the testing process, and got hired. And I got hired by mid-September, which was a really fast time for the city to do a process like that. So God's hand, looking back, God's hand was really on that. When I went through the initial testing, I was number 32 on the list, and they were going to hire a group of 25. I didn't find this out till later on. After my interview, I moved up to number 21. They hired 25 guys, 21 white guys, and 4 minorities, because back in those days it was very affirmative action based hiring.
Okay, yeah.
So I was the last white guy in my group hired.
Interesting. Okay.
Couldn't have worked out any better for me.
Yeah.
I had no idea what the job was, but it paid $17,000 a year when I was making $10,500.
Right.
So it was a nice pay raise.
Well, I've always heard it's hard. It's hard to get on to a fire department. Is it
It
just
is.
because so many applicants?
So many. Yeah, there were minimum 800, probably 1,200 applicants the year I
Goodness.
tried.
Wow, and they took 25 out of
25 out of that.
800. Goodness.
Yeah,
Wow,
and
that's
and,
crazy.
another testament to God, because
Yeah.
there's no way I could have done anything
Yeah.
like that on my own.
Wow.
So you went all the way up from that entry point, first day, to fire chief.
Yeah.
So how many years was that, and what did that journey look like in terms of promotions?
So when I got used to the job, fell in love with the job. It is such a great job. I encourage young men to at least look into it if they're so inclined. I had a battalion chief who I worked for. So the rank structure, basically firefighter, captain, battalion chief, assistant chief, chief. Those are the basic 5 ranks. There are a bunch of little things in there.
Okay.
But so battalion chief I worked for, I considered him a mentor. I played softball with him on a fire department league.
Okay.
Just a really good guy, handled himself well. So I was learning from him as we went along. And I set a goal of being a captain by 8 years and a battalion chief by 14 years. And then after that, I remember telling Debbie, and she would point out to me many times, once I became a battalion chief, I didn't want to be an assistant chief because that became too political. So I made captain at 8 years, was wanting to be battalion chief by 14 years, but I was just loving what I was doing so much. So you can do the fire side, you can do the medical side as a paramedic. Early in my career, I missed a lot of the really good fires. They just happened in a different part of town or on my day off. So I didn't get great fire experience in my first few years, but I had the opportunity to go through paramedic training, and I loved doing that, which was weird because 5 years earlier, there's no way in the world I could have done something like that because blood was, ooh, gosh, no.
Oh.
But seeing my first son born, being in the delivery room, just somehow changed things in my mind, and medicine became fascinating.
Okay.
So paramedic school I loved, so I spent a good part of my career being a paramedic on an ambulance rescue squad, medic unit, whatever we call them at the time.
Right.
And I was loving that so much that I didn't want to get promoted out of it. And then I got to the point where, okay, now I know I need to, start growing up and do things more expected. So I became a battalion chief at 18 years, and then started looking ahead at retirement. In the system at that time, you pretty much topped off on your retirement at 25 years of service.
Okay.
So that there were very few people who stayed longer than that. So I'm thinking, okay, 25 years, I would be 52 at the time. What am I going to do after that? And I thought, my goal had been always to develop a hobby I could make money at. Playing softball costs money. You don't make money.
Running marathons, which you ran
Running
many, that
marathons.
doesn't cost you. That doesn't
That
pay
costs,
you unless you speak Swahili,
Yeah.
which you're not good with languages. So that
No,
wasn't going to work.
that would ruin me out right away. So I thought, maybe I could look into being a fire chief somewhere. And when I first told Debbie the idea, she said, "You remember when you said you didn't even want to be an assistant chief because it's too political? And now you're talking about being a fire chief." I know, but I think I can be in that world without being political. So I looked into that, took a couple resume building things to get there. And then when I had 21 years with Omaha, the Papillion fire chief job opened up. The previous chief had been uninvited to continue his employment, and there was an opening there. Well, there aren't that many at the time. Omaha and Lincoln and Fremont were about the only 3 paid fire departments in the whole area. And Papillion had recently become one where they hire a chief and not have a volunteer chief. And I thought, it's early. It's 4 years shorter than my plan had, but it's an opportunity. I'll throw my name in there and go through the process just to see what it's like. And I made the top 5, I made the top 3, and then they offered me the job, and then I had a decision to make. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? So leaving Omaha early meant I left some pension money on the table that I would never see again.
That's right, because you're switching departments.
Right, yeah. So,
Omaha Papillion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Papillion has no pension. They just have a 401k like a lot of businesses do. I was actually, so this is weird, but I was battalion chief in Omaha, becoming on the hierarchy, a fire chief in Papillion, but I had to take a pay cut to go there.
Okay. Interesting.
And Debbie, being a very private person, wouldn't really want anything to do with limelight is a big word, being in the limelight of being the fire chief in a small community.
Yeah.
So they offered me the job on a Friday. I asked if I could tell them on Monday. It took me till late Sunday night to convince her that this really was a good idea. Taking the pay cut, being more exposed is good. But
How is this good?
Yeah. The deal we made was she would go to as few official events as possible.
Sure.
So she could maintain her privacy.
Sure.
Yeah. Very introverted. Likes to kind of be.
Yeah. I'm introverted. She was very introverted. I always kid her that if she could have been invisible, she would have loved that. So over the 15 years that we were married and I was fire chief, she went to 3 events: my swearing in, one mayor's Christmas party, and something else I can't remember. It was an award I got at Midlands Hospital. I thought, okay, I upheld my end of the deal pretty well. So I felt pretty good about that. Wow. So started as fire chief in Papillion in 2006.
Okay.
One little twist that not many people know about: the Monday morning I started there, my sister Beth called and said, "Hey, Mom's going into the hospital," or "I'm taking Mom to the hospital," because my mom had COPD and was on a slow but definite downhill trend. She was about 5, 6, 7 years into that. So that Monday morning, I'm at work for like 3 hours. And she calls and said, "I'm taking Mom to the hospital." Well, naturally I want to go to the hospital, but I'm at this brand new job.
Yeah, 3 hours into your first day.
And my administrative assistant looked at me and said, "Go to the hospital." I was very thankful that she told me that. So went to the hospital. Mom ended up dying that Wednesday.
Oh, wow.
So that was a bit of a rough start that way. And
Yeah.
one quick little story with my mom passing away. She went to the hospital Monday. By Wednesday morning, she was pretty much in a coma. She came out of it late morning for an hour or so. And during that time, she told us she was ready to go, but she wanted to wait for your parents to get there.
Really?
And if I remember right, they and the Larsons were out of town and due back early that afternoon.
Okay.
So we got word out, and cell phones were not really a thing quite by then.
Yeah.
So we got word out somehow that my mom wanted your parents and the Larsons there at the hospital. So they went right from the airport to the hospital up to Emmanuel, and they were there. They were there with us when she died.
Wow. I didn't know any of that.
So it was a very turned out to be a very special time because family, the Murdochs, the Larsons, a few other friends were there. Were singing.
Oh man,
When
what a
she
way to
passed
go!
away.
What a way to go!
Yeah.
Doesn't get better than that.
No.
We're all gonna go, and if that's how you go, that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
As hard as it is, it's
Yeah.
wow.
That's amazing.
My dad had 3 requests. It was similar. Your story reminds me. He said, "I want to die at home. I want to die with no pain, and I want my family around me." And he got all 3.
Wow, that's great.
He got all 3, and we were singing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So pretty cool.
I often wonder what the people in the hospital were thinking, because I know the Chris Springer was her nurse that last day.
Really? Oh, that's perfect.
And
They were the church too.
Yeah, they're church members, and Chris did a great job of walking us through
Sure.
the most likely turnout of what this was going to be.
Wow.
On that Wednesday.
Okay.
But yeah, it turned out to be a very special time.
Sure. Wow.
Yeah. Wow. So you spent how many years then in that role?
17 years.
Wow. Okay.
In looking into the role and fire chief career expectations, nationally, fire chiefs are at a department 3 to 5 years before they either retire or. I was amazed at how many fire chiefs will go from this city to this city to this city to this city, and generally they're there 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
And I'm not one to move around a lot, so I thought, if I can make it here 10 years, then I'll look at retirement or maybe find that something else to do. And I had the good fortune, the blessedness to work for two mayors who treated me really well. I always had told myself if I worked for a mayor who didn't want me there, I would just retire. I'm not going to go through a battle like that.
Yeah.
That's not good for anybody. But I had 2 great mayors to work for.
That's awesome.
And made it the 17 years.
And you're on the news all the time. Whenever they would do like a fire report or something, it's Bill Bowes on Channel 6. Here's the interview. It's like, hey, I know that guy.
Because Omaha Fire at the time, who, they're the big dog in the area.
Yeah.
They didn't see the value in cooperating with the media. So the media over a period of time, we're not even going to call them because they're not going to talk to us.
Interesting.
And then I knew a couple of reporters just in my time, and then they would call. Sure, I can do a story on that.
Sure.
And then at one point, I'm pretty sure I knew pretty much every reporter in the Omaha area.
Sure.
But yeah, they like coming to Papillion. We'd talk to them. We'd give them a good story. And,
Nice.
And I'm hoping, and I know that's continuing on now too.
Yeah.
Wow,
that's good. Wow.
That's good.
So now all you do is just lay around, do nothing,
it's wonderful.
nothing
Yeah.
to do. Retirement, you just do nothing, right?
Well, before that, we should probably talk about Debbie too, because that's the other big part of my story.
Yeah. Go
So
ahead,
Debbie
share
and I
that.
were married 37 years. I had known in my head that I was going to die before her, just because generally men die before their wives do. So she had hurt her knee, just wear and tear, nothing big, but she had torn a piece of cartilage in her knee in late February. And we didn't think much of it, took her to a doctor, they diagnosed it, she started physical therapy. What happened one day, because of her relative inactivity, a blood clot had formed behind her knee in that affected knee. Okay. And she had pain in her knee from what we thought was the injury, but hindsight again, some of that pain was probably the blood clot. We just didn't recognize it. So we had a tri-level at the time, so you couldn't go anywhere in the house without going up steps, and she couldn't do any steps yet because of her knee. So she was staying in the main living room area. So for a week and a half, I would get her breakfast, come home for lunch, or pack a little lunch in a cooler if I had a lunch meeting that day. And this particular Thursday, I gave her breakfast, and I don't even remember if I was going to be home for lunch or not. But just said goodbye. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. She was comfortable. And then about 11:30, she called me at work. And this was March of 20. So COVID now is dominating the national news. It hadn't quite hit here yet, but it was certainly on the coast.
Yeah, March is kind of when it kicked in.
Yeah. So at work, we're just overwhelmed with all this COVID stuff, changing our policies daily and learning new procedures based on what the public health people were telling us. And so she called me, which she never did. She always felt like if she called me at work, she'd be interrupting. You can call anytime. But she called, and I thought, that's kind of unusual. So I answered it, and she said, can't breathe. That was all she could get out.
Wow.
And I said, can't breathe, like 911 can't breathe? And she said, yes. So I was on a Zoom call with our 4 fire stations, and one of our captains told me later, he said, we had no idea where you went. You were just gone all of a sudden. I just took off. I told my administrative assistant, Debbie was having a hard time breathing. I was calling 911. I was going to go home.
Yeah.
We happened to live at the time in the Bellevue response area. So I talked to the Bellevue crews on the radio, telling them how to get in the house. And I got there about 3, 4, 5 minutes after they did maybe. And we were assessing her, treating her, getting her out of the house when she died. So from the time she started having difficulty breathing to when she died was about 30 minutes. And I was with her that last 15 or so.
Wow.
So the clot went to her lungs?
So what happened was the clot broke loose late that morning, went up and got stuck in her lungs.
Okay, yeah.
And essentially stopped blood flow to and from the lungs.
Okay.
Wow. It sounds like you
was
responded
terrible.
very quickly, though.
Yeah.
And of
Yeah.
course, being the fire chief, you knew all the procedures and how to do that really fast.
Yeah, and me and the Bellevue paramedics there, once we got a look at her, we knew what the problem was. We also knew there was nothing we could do about it except try to move fast. Because that type of thing, if it happens even in a hospital, they're probably still going to die.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because it was such a big clot in such a critical area.
Goodness.
So I compared the next 10 days of that to a concussion I'd suffered several years ago where I don't have much memory of that 10 days, of 10 days after I got the concussion. From the time Debbie died to a good 10 days later, I don't remember a whole lot of things. It's amazing what the brain does
Yeah.
when it goes through either psychological or physical trauma. The suddenness of it, the knowledge that I'm supposed to go first.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
Wow.
Wow.
Man. Super tough.
That's-
And down the road just a little ways, I think it's, what is it? Is it 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians 1 that the comfort that God gives you, you take and you comfort others. 2 Corinthians. So you've turned that experience into a ministry that
Right.
you're a part of now, helping other people that go through what you did, right?
Right. When after Debbie passed away, I knew there were books and I knew there were groups, but I didn't know anything about either one of those.
Right.
In fact, a woman who worked at Papillion, whose husband had passed away suddenly, stopped by my house and dropped off a bunch of books she had read, which was very nice of her. But I didn't feel like I was ready for those books for about 3 months. And then I started reading. One was by Tim Keller. Very deep book, very deep. But the few books I read started helping me on my grief journey. Yeah. And then in the fall, I started looking into Grief Share, which I knew nothing about. I just looked, what is this Grief Share thing? And found a class at King of Kings at a time period that worked for me. So once a week. And Sharon Zender and Francie Hines were the two instructors for that Grief Share and did just a wonderful job. I learned a lot about grief. When I went into grief, as paramedics, firefighters, we're taught that one of the things we're taught a brief lesson on grief because we deal with grieving people. And what we were taught was grief has 5 stages. So I'm thinking, okay, grief is a process. Right. So it starts here and it ends here. So during that summer after Debbie died, I thought, I want to get through this process as quick as I can. So I like to say I grieved intentionally. I dove into the grieving. If I felt like crying, I would cry. If I felt like playing music, I would play music. If I felt like being by myself, I'd be by myself. Whatever grieving wanted me to do, I was going to do it because I was going to get to the end of that process. That process. I learned that fall there's no end to grieving. No end. You just learn to live with it. So Grief Share probably is what taught me that. And I got so much out of Grief Share that I asked Sharon and Francie if I could sit with them during a session to learn how to be a facilitator. So now Sharon and Francie do the fall class at King and Kings, and a woman named Anita and I do the spring session of Grief Share. We just finished our fourth session together.
Great.
And every time I go through it, I get
Great.
more out of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
But my hope is that the lessons I learned in grief, I can share with others to help them on their grief journey. Because while we all go through this grief process, it's an individual journey.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to cover things in their own way.
Yeah.
And what works for one may not work for another.
Right.
So I've learned a lot of lessons on grief.
Wow.
Yeah. It's fascinating as
is.
a first responder. That's how little grief training you'd had prior to that experience. That's
Right.
really kind of blows my mind a little bit. But
One of the big things I remember from my initial training in grief, way back when I was becoming a paramedic, was essentially be blunt with people. If somebody dies in the home and we're doing CPR, and we know pretty quickly how much of a chance there's going to be of them coming back.
yeah,
When you're talking to the family, you can give them a little bit of hope, but paint an accurate picture for them.
sure.
Or if they're already dead, try to avoid terms like they've passed away, they've gone on. The best thing to say is they're dead. That's hard
Really?
to
For the
say
for the
Interesting.
reality to hit.
for the reality of it.
Yes.
Wow. That's
Yes.
really interesting.
Otherwise, it's too hard. You live in such denial.
That it's happening anyway.
Yeah, that until an authority figure
Wow.
like a paramedic says, "Look, this is what happened," it just doesn't feel real.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's hard to say the word dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Goodness. Phew, man.
Okay, so tell us a little bit, if you would, about Debbie's faith too, though, because that had to be a huge comfort to you in the days that followed. I know you said you couldn't remember much of those 10 days, but at some point, who she was in Christ had to be an amazing source of comfort for you.
We often talk in Grief Share because it's a faith-based program. How do people get through this without faith? Not only your own personal faith, but knowing where the person who has died is now.
Yeah.
Yeah, Debbie grew up. They weren't churched early on. Debbie's, much like a lot of our families, Debbie's mom got saved, and then Debbie's dad got saved. And then from that point on, they pretty much grew up in the Assembly of God church.
Okay.
He was in the Air Force, so they moved around a fair amount,
Okay.
pretty often.
Yeah.
But they would always find an Assembly of God church, and they had settled at Bellevue Assembly of God,
Okay.
being military. When
Yeah,
I met
yeah.
Debbie, her dad had just retired, but he went to work for a contractor right away. So they stayed in the Bellevue area, and from that was when I quit going to Trinity. When I met Debbie in May, started going to church with her at Bellevue Assembly, and then we were married in December. So we had a very short courtship.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
I violated one of your dad's